Good morning. Welcome to the Hockey Variety Podcast, episode 16. I think we're on. Thanks for tuning in. It's Saturday morning. I'm gonna post this today as well. I was gonna postpone this one to Sunday, but we do it live. There is a kitten in the office, and he is chewing on everything right now. And if I kick him out, he's gonna, catapult himself at the door until I let him in. So you're just going to have to put up with it. What can I say? Thank you for all of the positive feedback on the last episode. Definitely some kind words on that one. It is very much appreciated. I do this podcast for fun, but it is nice knowing that there's people enjoying it. So thank you so much. If you really do enjoy it, though, feel free to subscribe, leave a like, and all of that. It's about 8:30 when I'm recording this, and I don't know if you can believe this, but I've already played an hour and 15 minutes of hockey this morning. Yeah. I found out there's another drop-in time Saturday mornings at like 6:30 a.m. And I was up anyways because my fiance had a day shift. So I went. And you know what? I was really hoping for it to be like a good group of guys, and it was. I've noticed there's a few regulars at the drop-in hockey here. I'm not really a fan. Not really a fan of how they play. Not really a fan of how, maybe they conduct themselves, But super good group of guys on the Saturday morning one. So I think I'm going to start going to this one. I am very much a morning person, so 6:30, I can make that work. It's fine. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'm glad I went. My guys had a game in the city last night, and they lost. But oh boy, I gotta tell you guys this. So after every game, especially the games I don't make, one of our team reps, he'll post the game sheet that has all the stats and everything and penalties. The penalties are the main one I look at, because if there's a game misconduct, I need to know if I'm going to have to anticipate a suspension from the league or something like that. Because that's how it works. If you get a game misconduct, you get an automatic 1-game suspension. And because I'm pretty much our main team rep when it comes to that stuff, I need to know so I can talk to the guy and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't have any game sheets at the game last night. And I swear to God, the timekeeper wrote this on the back of a McDonald's receipt or something. Come on. I mean, this guy got a McDouble right before the game. And then is oh, I don't have a game sheet. I'm just going to write all the stats on the back of this. Okay, listen, I know I'm not always Mr. Prepared, okay? I'm usually pretty prepared, but, sometimes. But come on. A McDonald's receipt, come on. Okay, so, anyways, that was that. But, yeah, too bad my guys lost, but then they were playing a tough team, so we just got to get into the playoffs, so that's the big thing. I'm just going to pause for a second, just grab this kitten, because he's kind of bothering me. You know what? Actually, I'll let it be. Whatever. Okay. Got lots in store for today's episode. I'm going to talk about some current events. As promised, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last episode, but I'm going to talk about something I call the Cycle of Contention. Okay, and I'm pretty excited to talk about this. I'm quite proud of some of the slides I made here. And then I got a fantasy pick for you guys. So yeah, should be a fun episode. Hope you enjoy. And yeah, let's get into it. I lied. I grabbed the kitten, and now he's trying to bite my finger whenever he can. Yeah, he's going through a bit of a phase right now. He's just trying to grab and bite everything. It's a little annoying, but he's so cute that I don't care. So, anyways, first thing I'm going to talk about, there was a little scrum in last night's game in a Battle of California. We had the Ducks and the Kings, and Pheonix Copley, he hit somebody in the head with his blocker, which you can't do. Okay, I don't know if you know that, but you can't do that. And John Gibson didn't like that, and he came out of his crease, wanted to fight Copley, and the refs were like, no. And I've noticed over the years, refs really don't want goalie fights. They really don't. They probably don't want any fights, but they especially don't want goalie fights. And you got to think that, the refs kind of got together in a committee some number of years ago and made this decision, hey, if the goalies are going at it, get in there right away. Like, no, don't let it happen. And maybe goalies are more prone to injury when they're fighting. I mean, we look at Rick DiPietro years and years ago. He went to fight. Who was it? Was it Brent Johnson? I think it was the Penguins goalie, and then he fell and he got hurt. And yeah, but I mean, DiPietro getting hurt is nothing new. So there you go. But yeah, the refs got in right away. Both goalies wanted to go. And I mean, hey, I like a good goalie fight. Okay, I do. But I understand the refs got to follow orders. Totally get it. And I wanted to mention this because, I mean, we see guys like Jordan Binnington lose their temper and this and that. And then, you know, those guys, they get in the comment section, stick to the game. Just play the game. Do your job. Blah, blah, blah. And if I'm a coach or a GM, I wouldn't want my goalies doing this kind of stuff. Okay, I get it's an emotional game. However, for those Jordan Binnington critics and those Pheonix Copley critics, I got something to say to you, Buster. Be more fun. Okay? Be more fun. Come on. Like, as a fan, I want to see Jordan Binnington get up to shenanigans. Okay? I do. Even if it's my team. Even if he pump fakes Erik Karlsson with his blocker like he did that one time against the Sharks. I'm here for it. Okay? So you haters in the comments, I'm telling you, be more fun. Okay. And same with the refs. Be more fun. Let the goalies go at it. But at the same time, I understand you have a job to do. So, yeah. Okay. There was a big trade yesterday. And that's good. I was worried I wasn't going to have any kind of like juicy current event to talk about in today's episode. And oh boy, we got a big one. So, trade. You can see it right at the top of this little graphic that the Leafs made that I stole. Okay. Ryan O'Reilly. Ryan O'Reilly goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs along with Noel Acciari and a prospect whose name doesn't come to mind, but apparently he's not even important enough to be on this little infographic. So, yeah, I feel kind of bad for that guy. But the Leafs did get a third player. I think it is just a prospect, though. St. Louis gets back a lot. They get Abramov, Adam Gaudette, so, you know, depth player. Toronto's first this year, and I believe that's unprotected. Not that it matters. The Leafs are making the playoffs. I think the Leafs know that too. That's why I don't think they put any conditions on this, at least. I could be wrong, though. They get Ottawa's third this year, and then they get Toronto's second next year as well. And then Minnesota, who retained 25% of O'Reilly's cap hit. Oh, by the way, St. Louis retains 50%, so 50% plus 25%. Toronto is only taking on 25% of Ryan O'Reilly's cap hit. Bit of cap circumvention there. Just saying. That's how things go today. So, anyways, for retaining 25%, Minnesota gets a fourth. Toronto's fourth in 2025. So, quite a bit down the road. Keep in mind that's like 1 point something million that now the Minnesota Wild can't invest into a trade deadline piece, right? So this does matter for the Wild, okay? Because the Wild are likely making the playoffs, I want to say at this point. So they might have been looking to get in on a rental, probably not a big name rental, but now they have a bit less money to work with. So this kind of tells me that Bill Guerin wants to go with the guys that he has. But anyways, I'm not going to talk about Minnesota because they're not really like the real important teams in this trade. So Toronto, yeah. Now I've been quite critical of Toronto. I have mentioned I don't have a ton of confidence in them when the playoffs come around. You know, that might be changing a little bit, you know. So they're probably taking on Tampa. And, I mean, this is the biggest deadline deal Toronto has made in a while. And this might be what they need, really. I mean, I know O'Reilly's having a down season, but it's Ryan friggin' O'Reilly. He won the Conn Smythe just like 4 seasons ago. Okay, that's not that long ago. I know in today's day and age, we always focus on like super recent stuff, and if O'Reilly's having a down season, he's a bust, or not a bust, he sucks, and then meanwhile, if like a guy like Nick Schmaltz has like a 4-point night, people are like, generational talent. I'm exaggerating a ton, but Ryan O'Reilly's a fantastic hockey player. This is a good deal for Toronto. They get a bit more depth with Achari, another player I like. Great deal for Toronto. Seriously. They didn't have to give up anything super big other than their first, but that's going to be a pretty late first. A good move for Toronto. And you know what? I'm not saying I'm picking them in a round against Tampa yet. I do want to see which team is hotter going into the playoffs and make that an important part of my decision when I make my bracket. But, I have a lot more confidence in the Leafs now. I think O'Reilly's going to be a good fit. I've been hearing, he'll be on the third line. We'll see. I think he'll be more of a second liner, personally. I don't know how he's been in the face-off dot either this season, but Toronto's got a lot of center depth right now. I am really happy with this deal for Toronto. And then, of course, on the St. Louis side of things, this is great, right? If you're looking at retooling, I don't think they're going to rebuild, but if you're looking at retooling, which they are, and, they had some really big trade pieces in O'Reilly and Tarasenko, who are now both off the table, and St. Louis got quite a bit back for both of them. Good move for St. Louis. Seriously, lots of picks. This might be a team in a few years where we might see them as one of those teams that has one of the better prospect pools in the league. So maybe, it all depends on how they draft, right? And like that second is not nothing, and that third is not nothing either. Spat all over my mic when I said that. It's fine. And yeah, no. Good trade for both teams. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see until playoff time how this will really age. Yeah, I like it. It's a player I really like going to a team that I kind of like. I do like the Leafs. Okay, I know I'm pretty hard on the Leafs sometimes, but I do like the Leafs a little bit. Yeah. All right, I just whipped up this slide because I just remembered something I wanted to talk about. I got one more thing. Okay, so I was listening to 32 Thoughts last night while I was cooking supper. And, Elliot Friedman, Jeff Merrick, they're talking, right? And this is a Toronto-based podcast, right? They're not all about the Leafs, but maybe they talk about the Leafs a little bit more. And they mentioned, okay, I'm going to go on a bit of a little boomer rant for you guys here, okay? So get ready. Not really, but, just me hating on Canada a bit more. Okay, so Jake McCabe, this guy right there on the screen, I believe he was on our little trade list that we looked at last episode. So on TSN's trade bait list, I believe he was there. And he has a 7-team no trade clause, or sorry, 7-team no trade list, rather. So, he's got a bit of say in where he goes at the deadline. And apparently, of those 7 teams on his list, 6 of them are Canadian, okay? And I just looked this up too. He is, I have him in front of me. Okay, he's actually American, but still. Also, by the way, whenever you Google a player's name, how creepy is it that the first thing that like the autofill does is like so-and-so's wife? Like Jake McCabe's wife. Like hockey fans, the biggest perverts ever. Okay, so it's never sat well with me. I'm just like, oh, that's so weird. Okay, anyways, not talking about Jake McCabe's wife. We're going to talk about Jake McCabe. So he has 6 Canadian teams on his 7-team no trade list, right? And they were talking about this on 32 Thoughts yesterday, and they were like, I'm not offended. It's fine. Blah, blah, blah. Like, if he doesn't want to come to Canada, that's fine. I don't blame him, right? And it's like, yeah, people don't want to go to Canada. Why would you want to? There's so much pressure in Canadian markets. Like, okay, guys, like, they came across as, like, a bit offended by that. But it's like, dude, Okay, especially if you're American, playing in Canada is not like it's not the greatest thing ever, really. Like, am I crazy for saying that? I don't know. Like, it's I can see why people, even Canadian players from Canada, I could even see why they don't want to come to Canada. Okay? The markets, some of them, there's just so much pressure on the players. Okay? And I don't hate Canada. Okay? I love living here. And I want Canadian markets to chill out and go easier on their players because again, it's affecting their performance. All right? I'm going to talk about in a few episodes, I'm going to talk about the year where Edmonton had the best road power or the best road penalty kill in the league, but they had such a bad home penalty kill that it brought their overall penalty kill to like dead last. Okay. Which tells you there's something about the media and the fan base that is making these players play differently. I do not blame Jake McCabe for not wanting to play in Canada. Totally get it. Okay. And I think Canadian markets and Canadian fans, some of them, okay, definitely the minority of fans are the ones that are talking all the smack. And, you know, is the word self-deprecating? Like, I swear some of these guys don't want their teams to be good because of some of the stuff they say. It's terrible. So, respect for Jake McCabe. Stand his ground. I like that. Okay. Let's talk about this. All right. This is the main thing for today. Oh, I already see that my my little screencast is cut off the bottom there. That shouldn't be that shouldn't play a part in what we're doing here. Okay, so I know I try to keep this podcast a bit more audio focused, but this next section, it is going to be quite dependent on the visual. So I'm going to do my best to explain the diagram I have here verbally. Okay, so this is what I call the cycle of contention, okay? This is pretty much the typical cycle you see when a team is rebuilding or they're really bad and they're getting some pieces together and then they start to improve and then hopefully become a regular playoff team, maybe even a contender. More on that later. And then they hit a point where they start kind of questioning, hey, are we still a playoff team? Hey, is it in our best interest to go for a rebuild or a retool? And then the cycle goes full circle and you start over. You don't just see this in hockey. You see this in pretty much all sports. Okay, so this thing I'm going to talk about doesn't just apply to hockey. Now, so the cycle goes from rebuild or retool to improving to playoff team to questioning and then back to rebuild, retool. Okay. Now I do have a couple reverse arrows there as well. A team can go from questioning back into being a playoff team. Okay. Look at Winnipeg in this most recent offseason. Okay. Winnipeg was definitely a team I would consider is questioning if this is it. Questioning if we just have to make a few adjustments. They removed the captaincy from Blake Wheeler, so maybe there are some locker room adjustments they needed to make. I don't know. But they made some adjustments, and they became a playoff team again. The Winnipeg Jets will make the playoffs this year. I'm quite confident in that. So that's one of the few teams that will go from questioning back into playoff team. And then I have a red arrow there, because this is the worst position you can be in. A team that goes from rebuilding back to questioning, okay? And you don't see this too much. I wouldn't say any team right now is on this path, but think about the Buffalo Sabres a few years ago, okay? They tanked for McDavid, okay? No question. Whenever they had a goalie that was playing well that year, they would trade him, so they would get worse. Like, this was a team that was going all out for McDavid. They got the second overall pick that year. Not a bad consolation prize in Jack Eichel, okay? But then the rebuild started to fall apart, okay? Jack Eichel wanted out because management didn't want him to do his back surgery or whatever, which is, that wasn't a good look. And they ended up going back to questioning, I would say. And then, you know, I would say they did more of a retool than a rebuild. And now they're back into the improving category. So Buffalo's back on the right track. but we do see teams go back to questioning like that, and that is the worst position to be in, and that's why that arrow is red and not blue like the other ones. We also see teams that can cycle back and forth between questioning and playoff team pretty often. What comes to mind to me is the Detroit Red Wings of the 2010s. Okay, do you remember when Detroit, their goal was pretty much just to keep the playoff streak going, because they had a really long streak where they made the playoffs year after year. But the thing is, they were never good enough. Like in the 2010s, nobody ever picked Detroit to win a series, right? It'd be first round, maybe the odd second round out. But Detroit wasn't that good, right? They were just good enough to make the playoffs. And I think that was really detrimental. And then Kent Holland was like, Justin Albuquerque, man, we got to give this guy money. He's the guy. He's the key. You ever see that clip on YouTube of like George Lucas during like the production of Star Wars Episode 1? And there's this quote, and he's like, Jar Jar Binks, he's the key. He's the key to everything, right? And I kind of picture Ken Holland being like that about Justin Albuquerque, just in like, Albuquerque, he's the key. He's the key to everything. It's gonna be my thumbnail for this episode, something like that. So, okay, so yeah, you see teams like Detroit in the 2010s. They'll go back and forth between questioning and playoff team, and they never quite make that jump to rebuild and retool. And then they finally did the rebuild, which they're just starting to come out of now. So this is probably the first year where it's like, okay, this team is improving. And you'll see on the next slide here, I've actually got every single NHL team on this diagram. And I'm going to talk a bit about why I have certain teams where they are. And I don't think I have too much more to say about this. You know, you can differentiate between rebuild and retool. I was going to put a bit of like a time frame on this, but some teams, they get through the rebuild and the retool a lot quicker than others, right? Let me think of a few examples here. Actually, you know what? I want to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks, because they're a really good example of completing this cycle. And the Chicago Blackhawks, they're a good example of a team that took a while to complete the cycle. So in the mid 2000s, Chicago they were rebuilding. Okay, they were bad. They were getting some top picks, and that's how you want the cycle to go. You want to be bad. You get some first overall picks, some second, some third overall picks, and you have to draft well in the later rounds, obviously, right? So they get Jonathan Toews, second overall. Can't remember the year. I think he went second. He might have gone third, actually. You get Patrick Kane, first overall. You do very good at the draft a few other years, right? Duncan Keith, Corey Crawford. You know, you're getting those guys pretty late. Dustin Byfuglien, I think. I don't even know what round Byfuglien went in. He might have even been undrafted for all I know. But smart picks and some luck, right? Or you do bad and then you do well in the draft lottery, maybe. That's a good rebuild, okay? Then you move on to improving. Now, the Chicago Blackhawks, their improving phase was pretty quick. They made the playoffs in 2009, and then, boom, Stanley Cup 2010, right? So that went really, really quick. They went from a rebuilding team to a Stanley Cup champion quite quickly. Usually the progression isn't that fast. You can see the same thing about the Penguins, too, that the Penguins went pretty quickly. They went from rebuilding to contender. So this cycle, it's quicker for some teams, it's slower for other teams, right? And then Chicago's a contender for a pretty good stretch. I would say from 2010 till, I mean, you can make the argument they were already contenders in 2009. They might have made the West Finals that year. You know, so they might have gotten that contender conversation really quickly. So yeah, 2010 till 2016-ish. And then they started to fall off, and they fell into that questioning category, okay? And between all of that too, you know, some really good signings as well, right? They had to move on from some guys after 2010, but they knew they were going to have to extend Kane and Toews and Keith eventually. So I think those are smart decisions. And then, you know, 2018-ish, They start moving into the questioning category. Hey, we're not very good anymore. Our core is getting older, and we might not even make the playoffs. And then most recently, it's actually funny, during that questioning phase, they bring in guys like Seth Jones and Marc-Andre Fleury, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And then they move on from Fleury, and all of a sudden they're in a rebuild. And then the cycle is complete. So that is maybe about a 20-year cycle for the Chicago Blackhawks. And then meanwhile, a good example of this cycle going pretty quickly is the New York Rangers. Okay, so the Rangers made the Stanley Cup Finals, I think it was in 2014. Okay, and they were definitely in that playoff team contender category for a while they had Lundqvist. You know, they even, I guess they made the qualifying round in 2020. But anyways, like, you know, mid 2010s, you know, pretty good team. And then they started to realize, hey, we have some holes to fill that I don't think we'll be able to fill until the draft kind of thing. Maybe we have to make some offseason moves. So suddenly they're in the questioning category and they commit to a retool. And they also announced that publicly. Okay? They draft Kaapo Kakko, second overall. They got very lucky in 2010 getting Lafreniere. I remember that was the crazy COVID draft lottery where an unnamed playoff team got the first overall pick. That was so cool. Probably very frustrating for some teams. Like, well, actually, not the Sharks, because I don't think the Sharks had their first that year. I think Ottawa had it. I might be thinking of 2019. I don't know. What year did Stützle go? It's probably 2020, actually. But anyways, where was I going? Yeah, so the Rangers, Kakko, Lafreniere, signed Panarin. Most recently, getting Tarasenko, right? These guys are back to the playoff team contender category, okay? And that was quick. That was a quick turnaround. That was only like 6 years. So this cycle, it might take a team like Chicago to complete the cycle. And they did the cycle very well. They had a great rebuild that first time. They won 3 cups, and now they're back to rebuilding. And with the Rangers, they were contenders. They had some issues. They kept the really, really important guys around, like Kreider. Oh, I totally forgot. They brought in Jacob Trouba as well. He's a big part as well. Bring in Adam Fox, right? Like, they made a really quick, they did a really quick retool. So this cycle only took like 6 years for the Rangers, and it took like 20 years for the Chicago Blackhawks. And I'm sure you can think of teams that complete the cycle even quicker, okay? And just because your team misses the playoffs doesn't necessarily mean they're in the rebuild retool. So let's take a look at where I think some teams are at right now, and I will do my best to explain my reasoning for having them where I have them. Okay, so before you leave an angry comment about where I have your team, hear me out, okay? I do have rationale for all this. First of all, you might have noticed close to half of the teams are actually not even in a category right now. They're on one of the arrows, okay? And the like exact placement of each of these teams do matter, okay? So the teams that are like perfectly in one of the circles, it's because I'm pretty confident that is how you define that team, okay? Toronto's a playoff team, okay? Colorado's a playoff team. Boston is a playoff team. You might even consider them to be contenders. And in the top half of that bottom circle, the teams in the top half, I would consider them playoff teams. And when I say playoff teams, I mean like regularly making the playoffs, okay? I know Seattle's probably going to make the playoffs this year, but I'm not going to call them a regular playoff team just yet. However, you might be wondering why I would say that and have New Jersey inside that circle. Because New Jersey, they did the rebuild, okay? They're out of the rebuild. They're doing great. Jack Hughes is fantastic. He's just fantastic. I don't just think this is going to be a team that makes the playoffs this year. I think this is a team that's going to make the playoffs for, at the very least, a few years in a row here, okay? I like to think they're going to do even better than that, but I'm a lot more confident in New Jersey than I am Seattle, okay? And that's not me hating on Seattle, but let's not forget, this is a team that's in their second year of existence, and they had 60 points last year, okay? I have them just outside that playoff circle because they're done improving. They are a good team now. They have their issues. Okay, the goalies aren't good, right? So I think I'm pretty okay keeping Seattle outside of that. So there you go. Now the teams, there's a lot of teams between questioning and playoffs right now, and I know a lot of them are in the playoffs right now, but that doesn't mean they don't have questions, okay? The ones that are between questioning and playoff teams, those are teams that have questions, okay? There isn't a ton of questions, but there's a few questions, okay? Take Pittsburgh and Washington, okay? They're in the playoffs right now, okay? They might make the playoffs this year. That doesn't mean they don't have their questions. Their core is getting older. That you're starting to see some holes in their lineup. They might be on their way to being what I consider a questioning team, okay? And I have them on that arrow that's going towards questioning because I think that's the track they're on right now. And then you have teams like the Islanders who I think were questioning, and now they're back towards being a playoff team again, okay? I'm not saying they'll make the playoffs this year, but, you know. And then you might see some teams are closer to being a playoff team than questioning. For example, I think Florida is a bit closer to being a playoff team than Pittsburgh in the long run. And this graphic will be a bit more clear in the offseason, because in the offseason, it's pretty clear which teams are rebuilding. It's pretty clear which teams should be playoff teams the next year. So you'll probably see a lot less teams that are on the arrows, okay? You might notice that there's some teams that are about halfway outside of circle because technically I would say they're in that category, but they're starting to kind of creep their way out of the circle, okay? Take the Arizona Coyotes there. I literally have the Coyote with 1 foot outside the rebuild circle, okay? They're still rebuilding. This is still a rebuilding team, but I think they're one step towards the improving category. They're not in the improving category, and they're not even on the arrow that's going towards the improving category. But maybe Arizona is closer to being done their rebuild than a lot of people might think. I'm not saying it's next year they start improving tremendously. Maybe. I'm not saying it's even 2 years from now, but right now it kind of looks like it, okay? So I'm going to quickly go into each team, okay, all 32 teams, and why I have them where they are, okay? And there's a few I'm going to group together, all right? So let's start at the top, okay? We'll start at the teams that are in the rebuilding phase right now, okay? Pretty entrenched in their rebuild, I guess. Chicago, Anaheim, okay? And I have Anaheim maybe a bit closer towards improving because they got pieces. Chicago has a lot of work to do. Chicago, it's going to be a few years now. They are at the beginning of their rebuild, whereas Anaheim, probably about mid to late rebuild. We'll see, right? There's a lot of question marks with the Ducks right now. Now, Columbus, I have them on the retooling side of things. Okay, that's why I have them on the bottom half of that circle, because you might look at the standings and be like, wow, they're second last overall. This wasn't supposed to be a bad team. Okay, this is a team that brought in Johnny Gaudreau. They were supposed to be in the playoffs. Okay, let's not forget Elvis Merzlikins is a fantastic goalie having a down season. Okay, Johnny Gaudreau, phenomenal player having a bit of a down season. Oh yeah, I forgot. Columbus is missing their number one defenseman, Zach Werenski, who's fantastic, who is arguably the MVP of that team. Okay, we can leave that up to debate, but I think we can all agree an incredibly important part of that team, okay? This is more of a retool year for Columbus. They're going to get a high draft pick. They might even get Bedard. And I think as soon as next year, we can see Columbus returning to the improving section and perhaps be a playoff team sooner than we might think, okay? I've got Montreal and Arizona just a step outside that rebuild circle because they've got the pieces, and their pieces are improving. Caulfield's making progress. Suzuki's making progress. Slafkovsky, I know he's hurt right now, but he's looking pretty good. Okay, I'm not going to say fantastic, but I don't think he's going to be a bust or anything. I like Slafkovsky. You have just random guys like what's that kid's name? Harvey Pinard or Picard or whatever. Arbor's Zakai, good player. Okay, they got that goalie prospect Primo. They got the pieces, and they're starting to improve. We could see Montreal in that improving circle as early as, I'm going to say next year, but we'll see, right? It could be another year. It will probably be another year, but who knows? They should get another high draft pick this year. That's going to help. Okay, I've got 3 teams. I've got nobody like between rebuild and improving, but I've got 3 teams comfortably in improving, and that's Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit. 3 teams that are in the Atlantic and are probably having a tough time kicking out some of those Atlantic teams, that being Boston, Toronto, Tampa, and Florida to some extent, right? It's a tough division. It's a tough division to go from improving to playoff team. We'll see how long those 3 teams are going to be kind of mediocre, but they're getting better, okay? Go easier on those teams. They're getting better. I would love to see Buffalo in the playoffs, but the important thing is they're taking step forwards. Tage Thompson, absolute machine. Owen Power's looking great. Dahlin is looking like one of the best defensemen in the league. Very fun to watch. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen looks great too. Like, good team, right? But we'll see. We need to start seeing some of those playoff teams start to fall out in order for them to get in. I already talked about Seattle a little bit. With Seattle, again, I'm just like, just because they're in a playoff spot right now and they will likely make the playoffs, I'm not going to call them a regular playoff team just yet. Again, Seattle has its issues. We'll see. I could see Seattle being a regular playoff team. But that being said, I could see them heading towards questioning eventually too. So, yeah, I don't want to jump the gun with Seattle just yet. Let's not forget, this is a team that got 60 points last season. Don't forget that, okay? Not too long ago, this was one of the worst teams in the league. And I'm very happy to see them getting better. I really am. I can't wait to see Seattle in the playoffs this year. I love Martin Jones, one of my favorite goalies. I love seeing him starting to kind of get his career back on track. But I'm not going to call them a regular playoff team just yet. Okay. Now, you can definitely debate which teams you have as contenders, okay? The word contender, it really depends on who you ask. I would say there's 5 teams I would confidently consider contenders right now. That's the Rangers, Tampa, Carolina, Boston, and Colorado. And you might be like, Colorado? But, you know, the defending Stanley Cup champion should always be in this category. They're going to be the team to beat still. They just have to get in, right? And then for teams that I would just categorize as playoff teams, Toronto, Dallas, New Jersey, and Edmonton. These are teams that I think they're all going to be in the playoffs next year as well. They will be making the playoffs, I'm going to say, indefinitely. And same goes for the contenders. But we'll see. I mean, a team like Boston could make its way towards questioning as soon as next year. However, it really depends on how the offseason goes, right? And hey, don't forget, we said this about Boston last offseason, and they are the hottest team in the league, and they've been the hottest team in the league all season. I know right now, but I mean, they should be winning the President's Trophy. And the fact that we had a team that a lot of people had missing the playoffs this year, they're the front runners for the President's Trophy. That's pretty sweet, and really happy to see Allmark playing well. I'm really happy for the Bees, but again, that could be a team that could make its way towards questioning next year. But if history tells us anything, they should be a playoff team next year, right? I don't know. Boston, very fun team to watch. I've got 3 teams that are just starting to maybe make their way. Well, okay, 2 teams that I have them just outside, or half inside the playoff bubble, half outside of it. LA and Vegas, those are two teams that probably going to make the playoffs. They should make the playoffs going forward, but they have their questions, especially Vegas, right? This is a team that moves on from players really quickly. LA, this is a team that's looking to add more pieces. They got a lot of prospects, but they kind of sort of have some issues in net. Who's their goalie? Is it Copley? When the playoffs come around, is it Quick? They're paying all this money to Peterson. Big fan of Peterson. I want to see him get his game back together, but right now you're paying a lot of money for an AHL goalie. And with Winnipeg, let me explain Winnipeg. So I have them just outside, barely inside the playoff circle, but on the down arrow from questioning. Because this is a team, like I said, they were a questioning team this offseason. They made some adjustments. They're a playoff team now. And if you think that I should have Winnipeg fully inside the playoff bubble, I totally get that. I do. In fact, maybe I should, but I do want to illustrate that this is a questioning team that figured it out. And next year, I've got no reason to think Winnipeg won't make the playoffs again. Okay, they've got very good players. They got a very good goalie. This is a team that went from questioning back into being a playoff team. Okay, I've got Calgary, Florida, and Minnesota just outside that playoff team circle, and not too far towards questioning, but that's because those are some teams that have some questions, okay? Same with the Islanders, but I think the Islanders are heading back towards playoff circle. You have Nashville, Pittsburgh, and Washington about halfway between being a regular playoff team and being questioning, because those are some teams that have questions. They do. They've got some issues in their roster. Even though they might make the playoffs this year, that doesn't mean there aren't questions there, okay? So, again, if your favorite team is not in that playoff circle I have there, it doesn't mean I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. It means, where are we going from here? There's questions. These are all teams that might not make the playoffs next year, okay? They might have some things they need to address. Look at Calgary. Calgary made a ton of changes. It's not really working out. They might miss the playoffs. This is a team that has questioning. In fact, some of these teams, you might even want to put them into the questioning category. Okay, let's talk about that category. I've got 3 teams comfortably in the questioning category: Philly, Vancouver, and St. Louis. And these should all be pretty obvious. Because where they're going, right? Like, either of these, or any of these 3 teams could go either way in the offseason, right? Maybe you sign a few guys and you go for playoffs again. Or maybe you start selling even more, make even more adjustments, and make your way towards rebuilding or retooling. I know a lot of Canucks fans want that to happen. They want to start getting rid of guys, start doing a rebuild here. But you have some pretty good players right now that are pretty young. You got JT Miller, who hasn't even started his contract extension yet. It's a tough position for the Vancouver Canucks. And actually, it feels a lot like how the Sharks were a few years ago, where you have players who want to win. Obviously, everyone wants to win, but you have players, the team wants to win, the team wants to be a playoff team, but they're not getting the results, and management might want to go the other way. And where do you go, right? Vancouver's in a very tough position. And I'm not saying if they make a few changes, they're going to make the playoffs, because we've said that before about the Canucks too. But it's a tough position, right? Because if you go towards the rebuild, do you sell Elias Pettersson? I mean, I know people are going to want him, but do you do that? How often does a player like that come around? Quinn Hughes. Do you get rid of Quinn Hughes? Like, this is not going to be an easy decision for the Canucks, even though some fans will think it is. Just rebuild, just rebuild. It's not that easy. And then you have JT Miller. Nobody wants Miller. I mean, I think nobody would want Miller. And you're committed to him now, right? It's tough. It's tough. Now, St. Louis, that might be a team that just needs to sign some guys in the offseason. I think St. Louis might be closer to getting back into that playoff talk, but It's tough to say, right? They might just do a quick retool or aim to do a quick retool. These last two trades they made kind of indicate that because they could have extended either of those players, but they didn't. And Philly is like historically the team that totally ruins this diagram, okay? Because what are they? They're like, are they always a questioning team? Because remember in 2020, they were, I don't want to say a favorite going into the playoffs, but man, they look good going into the COVID bubble. They were good. They only got to, I think, the second round, and then they got knocked out, but and now they're not that good. They're playing better with Tortorella now, but what are they? They're not rebuilding, I don't think. Are they going to retool? Like, Philly completely breaks this cycle. Are they improving? Because they're getting better than they were last season. Like, it's... Philly just totally ruins this cycle. And they have historically. They had that long streak where it was like, make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, make the playoffs, you know. Philly, yeah. Honestly, you could put Philly in questioning. You could put them in improving. You can put them in retool if you want. And you can put them anywhere in between. We know they're not a playoff team. They're not making their way towards being a playoff team this season. But, yeah, they kind of break this cycle. And you know I saved the best for last, okay? The San Jose Sharks. Oh boy. Okay, so you might be looking at this diagram and wondering, why are the Sharks not in the rebuild bubble? Okay, right now I have the Sharks, if you're just listening to the audio, I have them halfway between questioning and the rebuild retool bubble. Okay, because here's the thing. They haven't yet made the moves that show you this is a rebuilding team. Okay, Meyer's still a Shark, right? Some of those other guys like Carlson, who are sort of kind of rumored, they're still Sharks right now. They haven't made the moves that are like, we are rebuilding. They're bad enough that they should be a rebuilding team. The team hasn't publicly said they're going to rebuild or retool, as far as I'm aware. And I know that's not like a prerequisite to be a rebuilding team. But when you look at teams like Montreal, I don't think Montreal ever said they're rebuilding, but come on, right? Look at what they're doing. That's a rebuilding team, okay? So the Sharks, it really depends on Guerin, right? And, you know, a few years ago, the Sharks players, some of them came out and said, hey, we want to be good. We're signed to extensions, but it's like, buddy, play better, okay? You want to be a playoff team, play better, right? But anyways, I think that's a good spot to have the Sharks. They could be in that rebuild bubble as soon as this summer. But right now, I can't confidently put them in there. But notice that they're pretty far from being a regular playoff team. And you know what? I was thinking about this morning too. Like, I will sing the praises for Doug Wilson till the end of time. He did such a good job at keeping the Sharks in contention for a long time. I know they never won the cup. I know they only had one cup final, one, maybe two President's trophies in there. But the Sharks were always a team. They were in that playoff bubble for a long time. And I think Doug Wilson and the moves he made played a big part. Was he the one that brought in Joe Thornton during his Hart Trophy season? Like, that's a big move. And they didn't really give up too much in the grand scheme of things. You know, so Doug Wilson, he did a ton of good for this team. And I know he left the team for health reasons, and I really want him to make a full recovery with whatever he's going through. I want him to be healthy and happy and all of that. And I would love for him to get back involved into the San Jose Sharks community if he's not already. You know, I'm not saying he needs to be hired by the team again, but, you know, he needs to be part of that team culture. He's very good for this team. Now, I'm praising him because I'm going to criticize. He did not leave this team in a good condition, okay? One of his last moves being extending Hurdle. They should have traded Hurdle. And that was the thing about Doug Wilson, is he you can tell he's a very nice guy, and he's very loyal to his players, possibly as a result. And you know what? Like, I think when you're a general manager, you need to have that balance, right? You have to be a little cutthroat. You need to be able to make those tough decisions. And that's why Guerin needs to trade Meyer, because he could give Meyer a crazy big extension, but that's not the right thing to do. And re-signing Hurdle, I love Hurdle, one of my favorite players. That wasn't the right move. You need to get back a ton for Hurdle. And now you have Hurdle, who's a pretty mid-tier player now, making a lot of money for a long time. So anyways, the Sharks, I'm gonna redo this diagram in the summer, because I think we'll have a lot less teams on the arrows. But yeah, we really just have to see how the rest of the season goes. Okay, let's wrap things up. We've got a fantasy pick for this episode. I've got Mads Søgaard, goaltender for the Ottawa Senators. Forsberg is hurt for a long time. Talbot's going to be out for, I think, at least a couple more weeks. He's from Denmark. Interesting. He might be there, like, well, I guess he still got Frederik Andersen, but Søgaard, he might be the national team goalie pretty soon. Søgaard, he's going to get a lot of starts for Ottawa. Ottawa plays 4 times this week. They don't play Saturday this coming week. Not today, Saturday, but like a week from now. And we all know how important it is for players who don't play Saturday, because you don't have to try to find a way to shove them into your roster, okay? Pick up Søgaard early in the week if he's still available. I think a lot of teams have probably picked him up already. And, like, I know he's only 1-2 on the season. He's going to get a lot of starts. I think Ottawa's got an okay schedule this week. They've got 4 games, no Saturday, and I think pretty okay opponents. There might be 1 or 2 tough games in there, but and I don't think any back-to-backs. So Søgaard's probably going to get the net for, I'm going to say, at least 3 of those games, maybe all of them. So Søgaard's available. I recommend picking him up. It's a good week for Ottawa, so if, maybe check out some other players on Ottawa as well. Shane Pinto, maybe give him a sniff. I don't know. Okay. And that's it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I really appreciate the support. I've gotten a lot of love for the podcast lately, and I definitely really appreciate the support from people. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube page if you haven't already. Feel free to leave a like. Don't be afraid to leave a comment. Let me know how wrong my diagram is. But there's a lot of arguments you can make on that diagram too, of where I have certain teams on it. And again, that cycle, it's ever changing. We might see some of those teams be questioning teams by the end of the season. Maybe they will be committed to a rebuild. Who knows? But I do want to redo it in the off season. I'm going to be keeping an eye on some trades as we get closer to the trade deadline, and I will be sure to cover them in the podcast. And thank you so much for listening. I should have another episode out pretty soon. We'll see. We'll see how today goes. I got some stuff to do, but I kind of want to pre-plan another episode later today. So yeah, cheers and thanks for listening.